Hi, I'm Blake Marth, back with the Blake Marth Talks About Something Important organization, focused on spreading awareness on one topic at a time. As we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has had so many effects on people all around the globe. Millions died from the virus, and many more contracted it, with some experiencing permanent side effects from the disease. Social distancing and masks help to control the spread, but many miss seeing their friends and loved ones in person, and even when they did get to see each other again, many missed being able to see their full faces. But something prevalent to even those who didn't catch the virus were the economic effects it had all around the world. For many people, the most jarring part of the pandemic came from the economic shutdown around the globe to help control the spread. The once crowded and busy streets of New York City, Tokyo, Paris, and so many more iconic cities were left desolate. While it is easy to think that things have fully gone back to normal and the chaos of that time is behind us, COVID has left us with long-term economic effects that will be looked back on and felt for generations. This video aims to show the effects that COVID-19 had on our world economy. For starters, there are many statistics to show that the pandemic hurt the economy. According to the Brookings Institute, the GDP fell more than 10% during the worst of the pandemic in just 9 months. For reference, the worst the GDP had fallen since the 1980s was about 4% during the Great Recession, which took 21 months to get to, as opposed to just 9 that it took for the GDP to fall 10% during the COVID recession. There is also the percent change in employment, which fell about 15% compared to the business cycle peak. The Great Recession was the worst recession besides this since the 1980s, but it only fell 6% and it took about 25 months to reach its peak, while the COVID recession took only about 2 to 3 months to reach its peak, and although things did improve after that, it was still far worse than the peak of the Great Recession. Retail sales also sharply declined for a time, dropping over 20% in the first few months of the crisis, though they did pick back up soon after. Small business revenue was down more than 20%. Workers not at work quadrupled from January to April. In 26 states, over 20% of households were falling behind on rent payments. 2018 to July 2020, food insecurity doubled. According to NPR, COVID's most relevant current economic effect is on the prices for gas. This has to do with the rebound of the economy, as many people are getting back to driving and so the demand has increased. This makes the gas more valuable, and this, combined with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, making gas less available, has shot up the prices around the globe. Presidents Trump and Biden both had policies put in place to attempt to slow the spread and help the struggling economy. In a speech on March 11, 2020, Trump talked about the ban on travel from China to the U.S., as well as suspending travel from Europe for 30 days, as well as cargo restrictions. He also said that health insurance companies agreed to waive co-payments for COVID treatments. He also signed an $8.3 billion deal to support distribution of medical support. Lastly, he also said there are plans for economic relief through Congress as well as loans to small businesses. President Biden, in a speech from February 5, 2021, spoke about the unemployment and hunger rates and how the government should respond to the pandemic. He speaks of the American Rescue Plan, including $160 billion in COVID vaccination processes like manufacturing and spreading vaccines. He also speaks of $1,400 checks for people making under $80,000 a year or couples combined making under $160,000 a year. He also speaks of an unemployment insurance extension by 6 months, rental assistance, money to help reopen schools, many of which were still closed, and money to create more jobs. He says it is more important to spend and to make investments, even if it means spending with deficit money. Now, what do the policies that Trump and Biden implemented mean for the economy? Well, first off, the policies that the presidents used is called expansionary policy, which is the policy of increasing spending and getting into deficit spending to try and increase the GDP. With all the statistics laid out earlier, the economy was clearly in a recession and needed some juicing up. While these policies have helped to increase the GDP relative to their low points, it has also caused inflation, though this also has to do with the world opening back up and many people going out and spending more. The shutdown also affected the economy in ways besides just unemployment and spending bills. Many industries were affected by COVID, which also contributed to the economic problems. Sports are a big example. Since I'm a big NFL fan, go Pack Go, I'll focus on the effects the pandemic had on that league. Thankfully, the 2019 to 2020 season had ended in February of 2020, as well as the 2020 NFL Combine in Indianapolis. For sure. Still, there were numerous effects on the upcoming season. The 2020 draft, meant to be held in Las Vegas, went completely virtual, with Roger Goodell also calling picks very awkwardly from his basement, I might add. This event would have certainly been a big economic boost for the city, but the cancellation ended that opportunity, though Las Vegas would get its chance 2 years later for the 2022 draft. There were also limitations on fans, as all teams had some limitations on fan capacity, with most not allowing any fans at all. Without those ticket sales, there went another source of potential money for the economy. Many of these were necessary limits to prevent the spread, but they unfortunately led to money lost not just for the NFL and other sport leagues, but also a big loss in potential gains for the cities of those teams. This particularly hurt the city of Tampa, who were the hosts of Super Bowl 55 that year. This is obviously a huge economic opportunity for the cities that host the game, but due to fan limits, there couldn't be as many sales, and thus there was less buzz about this Super Bowl. Although I think Tampa's okay because their football team won the Super Bowl that year, so, I think they'll be okay. While most industries were universally hurt, some others had mixed results from COVID. A good example of this is the video game industry. Though many game companies had to follow COVID protocols, with many also going into working at home, the industry also did see some increases. As the Washington Post points out, the reason for this was due to the mass quarantine of people, leaving many needing something safe to do in their free time. So tons of them went and bought new video games. So even though the developers of these games couldn't put as much work in as they normally would and thus had less to sell on the market, the increased purchase rate from the pandemic may have actually helped the video game market. It's interesting to see things that got help from the pandemic rather than just being purely negatively affected. Lastly, I'd like to look at a company that was not so lucky from the pandemic. This company is Chuck E. Cheese. Although it is technically a part of the video game industry, arcade and entertainment places like Chuck E. Cheese specifically were hit particularly hard by the events of COVID. The company already had some financial struggles going into 2020, but the pandemic absolutely rocked any chance at a revival anytime soon. Many restaurants closed for safety reasons, and that led to the company filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in June of 2020. The company then permanently closed some restaurants and tried to get the remaining ones open safely whenever possible. However, the main reason I share this is because it was one of the happy endings of the pandemic. Well, kind of. The company managed to survive Chapter 11 bankruptcy and get back on its feet. I couldn't really find the profit that the company had made over the last few years, but their revenue did go up. While this isn't super promising since they were actually operating on a loss each year for many years, it is good to see that the restaurant chain had been making more money in the last few years, even if they're still taking a loss for now. Hopefully they can get back to making profits one day, because if Chuck E. Cheese closed, I think a new world war would break out. I wanted to briefly mention some of the effects that I have noticed from the COVID pandemic. Thankfully, I did not feel any real economic struggles in my family from the pandemic, which I am grateful for. The memories of this time will go down forever in history, and it's just all so surreal to think about 2 years removed from the beginning of this crisis. It showed me just how precious life could be, as in the past, whenever I'd see statistics for deaths from whatever it may be, I didn't really think about them as people and more so just as a number compiling. COVID showed me that those piling numbers are real people, which made me consider how important it was to be safe during trying times like this. It has also shown me a lot of ways for how economics can work. While the economic response to COVID wasn't perfect, leaders all around the world did what they thought was right to try and fix the economic issues. Even if things haven't shaken out perfectly in that regard, I can't necessarily say I would have done otherwise myself. Sometimes you just gotta trust your leaders to do the right thing, and even if you disagree, you just gotta stick by them. To sum it all up, the economic effects of COVID-19 on the global economy will echo in the hearts and minds of many forever. But to many, many more, the effects that the virus had on their own friends, families, and well-beings is even more important to remember. I'm Blake Marth, with the Blake Marth Talks About Something Important organization. See you next time.